Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. We hear from a former Ontario Liberal MP who says the Liberal Party may be wiped out in the next election to the point of having to make a name change. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation responded to the PBO's bleak report on Canada's finances. And we hear the powerful story of how a nonprofit group in Canada continues to make a big difference in the lives of kids, including a 10-year-old Alberta girl who's battling cerebral palsy.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the killing of the chief architect of the October 7th terrorist attack in southern Israel, which left 1,200 people dead, will not end the war in Gaza. Now, he does say, however, it represents the beginning of the end.
To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. Hamas is holding 101 hostages in Gaza, who are citizens of 23 countries, citizens of Israel, but citizens of many other countries. Israel is committed to doing everything in our power to bring all of them home. And Israel will guarantee the safety of all those who return our hostages. The reign of terror that the Iranian regime has imposed on its own people and on the peoples of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, this too will come to an end. All those who seek a future of prosperity and peace in the Middle East should unite to build a better future.
Now, thousands of people took to the streets in Israel, reacting to the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Many of the protesters in Tel Aviv are still calling for a hostage deal in hopes that the 101 people taken captive by the terrorist group Hamas will be returned home fairly soon.
There were 6 opportunities to take out Sinwar many times years ago. And today, it's an object that should have been done, but still, the timing is frightening because as we see now, there is a possibility that it will harm the hostages. Maybe they've been harmed already or it will happen. And the concern and the worry is very deep, and there should be a deal sealed immediately.
What do I think is going to happen now that we have this so-called game changer? The war in Gaza will continue. The hostages will not be released as a result of this operation.
A special Chiefs Assembly hosted by the Assembly of First Nations wrapped up in Calgary on Friday with a resolution on child welfare reform here in Canada. First Nations chiefs rejected a nearly $48 billion child welfare reform deal on Thursday following a lengthy debate. One of the resolutions includes for chiefs to be given another 90 days to review the agreement, with another vote taking place sometime in January. The agreement was reached with Ottawa last July. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation says spending by the federal government is simply out of control. The group is calling on Ottawa to cut spending following a report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer. The study by Yves Giroux says the deficit is now $6.6 billion over budget. Now, the man who's a little bit more on the hard numbers is the federal director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, who joins us from Ottawa. Franco, what you're saying is that the numbers kind of look bleak.
You know, as bad as the budget was, the independent budget officer is showing that the federal finances are even worse. Okay, 6 months, $6 billion over budget with the deficit. When Trudeau announced his budget 2024 back in April, he was projecting a $40 billion deficit. Now, that's crazy in and of itself, but these new numbers from the Parliamentary Budget Officer project the deficit even higher at about $46 billion. I mean, folks, this is getting embarrassing how bad the books are being managed by the federal government. I mean, come on, it is 2024. We're not in a pandemic. It's ridiculous and completely unacceptable for the federal government to be running a $40 billion deficit.
Now, Franco, when you have a debt as high as Canada's, which is over $1 trillion now, that means that our interest payments are also quite high, correct?
Oh, yeah. Interest charges on the debt are blowing a $1 billion hole in the budget every single week, right? So these massive deficits mean higher taxes for you down the road. It means more of your money is being wasted on interest charges, and it means more debt that your kids and grandkids have to pay back. So this year, interest charges on the debt are costing taxpayers about $53 billion, which is more money than the federal government will send to the provinces in health transfers. In fact, almost 11 cents of every dollar that the government is taking from you is going to pay interest on the federal credit card.
Thanks so much, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa. You know, there are reports of an alleged revolt taking place within the Trudeau Liberal caucus. Now, the Prime Minister is losing 4 more cabinet ministers who've decided not to seek re-election. They are Marie-Claude Bebeau, Carla Qualtrough, Dan Vandal, and Philomena Tassi. So what is going on within the Liberal Party? Dan McTague may have some answers for us. He's a former Liberal MP who served under both Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. He joins us now from Milton, Ontario. Dan, the 4 cabinet ministers who are not seeking re-election say they're leaving for very personal reasons, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Justin Trudeau. Are you buying that?
I mean, yeah, I believe that. Look, there's 16 Liberal MPs, including the 4 cabinet ministers, who are not going to run next time. And I think there's a wider sense among the 152 Liberal MPs that their chances of winning are maybe 1 in 6. If I look at the numbers very correctly, every poll's indicating no more than 40 to 50 will be returned, maybe even less than that. So we're looking at an evisceration of the Liberal Party on a scale we haven't seen since 2011, when I was defeated, and possibly even further than that, going back to 1984. It's likely that the Liberal Party will wind up 3rd, maybe even 4th in the next federal election. And it demonstrates the extent to which this party and its caucus was so loyal to the leader that they didn't tell him the truth last year when he should have left. Now it may very well be too late. It doesn't matter who comes in, they will inherit this poison chalice.
Dan, could we actually see Justin Trudeau step down as party leader, maybe the party appointed new leader to help them rebuild before the next federal election? And if so, who would Trudeau's successor be?
Very hard to say. There are a lot of people whose names have been bandied about. We know Chrystia Freeland. We know Mark Carney. There may be a few others that are, out in the thicket, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. We're looking at a scenario where it could be very much a John Turner or even a Kim Campbell moment for the Liberal Party. I'm not unconvinced the Liberal Party may very well cease to exist well into after this next election, and may have to recover under a very different name with a very different set of policies, certainly policies that will bring them back to the center, which they abandoned under Justin Trudeau. In 2011, the party went down to 3rd place. It would have taken a couple of elections to rebuild. Instead, it got a quick fix with the name Trudeau. Very appealing to some people in urban areas across Canada, but you could see that is short-lived. And now that he's out of the way, or potentially out of the way, there really isn't much in the way of a succession plan for the Liberal Party. I think it's going to be a number of very tough years with very limited number of seats in the House of Commons.
Now, the latest polls have the Conservatives with at least a 20% lead over the Liberals in many ridings across the country. The Tories are even leading in many parts of Toronto, which has traditionally been a Liberal stronghold. Does any of this surprise you?
It surprises me historically, but it doesn't surprise me realistically. I speak to a lot of people and they're very upset. Their standard of living has been badly compromised. People believe that the country is broken, and they also aren't prepared to let Mr. Trudeau and company off scot-free. They believe that a lot of things that have happened, from migration to rising crime to unaffordability as a result of the government meddling with green taxes, has contributed in no small way to the decline in Canada. And I think Canadians are now finally holding this leader's feet to the fire.
Thanks so much for your time today, Dan. That was former Ontario Liberal MP Dan McTague joining us from Milton, Ontario. Well, it was another beautiful autumn day here in southwestern Alberta and Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, how's the weekend shaping up so far?
Yeah, it's looking pretty good so far. Hell, we're jumping back into above seasonal temperatures for both Saturday and Sunday, looking at a high of 19 degrees tomorrow and even warmer than that on Sunday. Here's the thing, though, along with those really nice weekend temperatures, we're also seeing some very strong wind gusts. So this evening, we're looking at gusting winds up to 60 kilometers per hour. Tomorrow on Saturday, up to 70K. Now, today we had 30 to 50K winds, just to put that into perspective. So they are about to get stronger. So hold on to your hats. I'll be back later in the show to give you that national forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Alberta government officials have brought forth new regulations they say will make the local election process more transparent. The province's Bill 20 will add greater transparency and require greater accountability from local councils and elected officials. The new regulations include expense limits for local election campaigns across Alberta. The legislation and regulations will come into effect on October the 31st.
Any political party can register with the returning officer in Calgary and Edmonton. This means candidates in the next municipal elections in Alberta's two largest cities can have a local political party listed next to their name on the ballot if they choose. But in order to do so, they will need to follow some rules. First off, local political parties cannot be affiliated with or accept donations from any provincial or federal party. We said that before, and I will say it again, this is about transparency in local democracy, so it's important the local politics remain local. We also have set regulations on party names to ensure there's no confusion among the electorate. Second, a local political party must have a membership of at least 1,000 eligible electors from within the municipal jurisdiction. They must also prove they have a sufficient number of candidates to run for at least 1/3 of the total seats in a municipality.
Well, it appears as though the Alberta NDP was not impressed with Minister McIver's announcement. In an email to Bridge City News, the NDP's municipal affairs critic, Kyle Kasowski, had this to say: with Bill 20, the UCP are trying to bully local elected officials and ensure that they install people friendlier to their agenda. It is undemocratic and disrespectful to citizens. An Alberta man was not found criminally responsible in the death of his mother last year. Scott DeMolitor was charged with second-degree murder following an assault at the family's home east of Calgary. The charge was later downgraded to manslaughter. Court of King's Bench Justice Nancy Dill says DeMolitor showed signs of paranoia and a disconnect from reality in the days leading up to the attack. He remains detained in hospital until a mental health review board determines if it's safe to release him back into the community. The Regina Police Service has a new unit to address the needs of the downtown core. 7 alternative response officers aim to help create a safer and more welcoming city. Now, those officers recently finished 5 weeks of in-service training. Regina Mayor Sandra Masters says having a visible police presence downtown is critical to ensure safety and business viability. The federal and Manitoba governments have signed a deal to expand school food programs. The Trudeau government set aside $1 billion over the next 5 years in the last budget for these kinds of programs. Now, as part of the deal, Manitoba is to receive just over $17 million over the next 3 years. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says the agreement builds on Manitoba's nutrition program that was expanded last month. Talking about child abuse prevention can never be easy, especially when it comes to raising awareness about an issue that sadly affects so many people. The manager of the Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Centre, Cheryl Patterson, explains why it's so important to get the word out and how many kids are impacted by abuse.
Child Abuse Prevention Month in October provides us with an opportunity to raise awareness about the prevalence of child abuse in our communities, but also to empower people to become advocates for children in need. In Alberta, 1 in 3 individuals will experience sexual violence or abuse before the age of 18.
3 main initiatives that we have prepared this month to raise money and to really spread that awareness. So the first is on October 24th, we encourage individuals to wear blue or turn their house lights blue. We also have a 50-50 going on all month. And then finally, our biggest fundraiser is going to be the Galactic Giving event that is happening here at Galaxy Bowling and Pizza on October 26th.
And officials say that bowling event will run from 2 till 6 p.m. The price of the ticket is $25, which will support the campaign. A Lethbridge family witnessed firsthand how caring a community really can be. The Starlight Children's Foundation helped bring hope and joy when it was needed the most. BCN's Heidi Echeverria has the details in this very touching story.
Going through a serious illness takes away time for fun and spending as much time as possible with our loved ones. Going to appointments, receiving treatments, and undergoing medical tests are all part of this important but exhausting routine. That is why Starlight Children's Foundation Canada plays a vital role in the life of many children with serious illnesses, including Anna. Jen, Anna's mother, explains a little about Anna's health.
So Anna was diagnosed with cerebral palsy when she was just a couple days old. She was born premature, so they found it on just routine scans, damage in her brain. And so we knew right from when she was a baby that she may have challenges. So her development was a little delayed, but she's done very well. And over the last couple years, the tone, so some of the problems with her muscles has gotten a little worse, and she had to have surgery in February, this last February, on her leg and had her hip rebuilt.
Starlight Children's Foundation of Canada joined Anna on her journey to bring joy, laughter, fun, and emotional relief for her and her family. The charity program gave them a 2-day train trip through the Canadian Rockies from Banff to Vancouver.
We've been given the opportunity. We went on the Polar Express with Starlight, so it was a whole group of kids with differing needs that we got to spend an evening at the Polar Express with them, and we were spoiled. Like, it was amazing how they treated us and fed us, and the kids got a little shopping spree at the Banff candy shop, and it was just amazing. And then on the train itself too, the food is incredible. The activities, they're just surprises. You just kind of, things get quiet, and then, oh, we've got another surprise for the kids, and we're making cookies, and you get a camera, and it just was like amazing, just so cool. For us, it's been like some of the fun stuff that we get to do when we're spending a lot of our time driving to Calgary for appointments. Our travel has been mostly just for therapy.
Anna and her father explained what the best part of their trip was.
I liked to see like all the beautiful view, and like it was just an amazing trip, and it was probably my favorite one out of like the Polar Express and all that. Like being on a train and being able to spend time with other families.
The Starlight people really do go above and beyond what I would say their basic job description is to make the kids feel extra special on that whole trip.
Even though the train trip ended, the family must continue with therapies and appointments. Anna, meanwhile, continues to receive the unconditional support of her beautiful family, including her brother Lucas, along with her parents Jen and Thomas.
No more surgery, hopefully, but just lots of physiotherapy and braces on her legs. She uses a wheelchair, which is new for her, as she improves her mobility. So we were kind of told to expect the worst, that she would have lots of problems with her speech and, you know, just everything, that her walking, her mobility, and we were told it would be worse than she has been, and she's actually done very, very well and is doing much better than we were told originally when she was a baby.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Well, it's been another beautiful fall day across much of southwestern Alberta so far, with so many beautiful colors on the trees, and the mild temperatures should remain for the weekend. Full weather details are coming up. We had sunshine mixed with clouds today and a fairly mild day here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is back with all of the weather details now. Jeanette, it may be a good time to head to the mountains to enjoy all of the colorful splendor that God has given us.
Yeah, and speaking of which, if you are heading to, say, Waterton, temperatures should be pretty nice there. Just keep in mind the wind. We could see up to 90-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts in Waterton if you were headed there tomorrow. And speaking of wind, it's supposed to get pretty windy in Lethbridge as well. We saw up to 50K winds today. Well, that's going to switch up to 70K on Saturday. High of 19 degrees, though, so that's the consolation there. Up to 21 on Sunday. Clear skies. We could see some rain on Monday, down to 10 degrees, down to single digits on Tuesday. Wednesday 7, back to 13 on Wednesday and 12 on Thursday. So for the most part, we're sticking within the seasonal range, except for the high temperatures on the weekend there. So average high for this time of year, 13, average low, -1. 26 was our record temperature on this day. That happened just recently, back in 2022. And in 1951, we saw the record low, which was -16. Sun rose this morning at 7:59. Sunset this evening at 6:33. We're seeing 10 hours, 34 minutes of daylight, 4 minutes shorter than yesterday. Okay, Victoria seeing a high of 13 degrees. We're seeing some periods of rain tomorrow, up to 60K winds. Vancouver, we're seeing a weather event happening there, prolonged rain. So they're under a rainfall warning. Vancouver, it actually started today, going to go right through to tomorrow. By the end of it all, Vancouver should receive 40 to 70 millimeters of rain, but more like 100 millimeters in other areas like the sea to sky corridor and along the North Shore Mountains there. Also 80K winds expected in Vancouver tomorrow. High of 13 degrees though, 17 for the high in Edmonton, 19 in Calgary with partly cloudy skies for both of those cities. As we get to the rest of the prairies here, mainly sunny skies. Saskatoon 19, 18 in Regina, and a high of 16 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg up to 60 km/h winds tomorrow, so could see a little bit of wind there. The rest of the country here, let's look at the central part here. Lots of sunshine, lots of clear skies, lots of beautiful teen temperatures. 19 in Toronto, 18 in both Ottawa and Montreal. Should be a lovely Saturday there. In the Maritimes, Fredericton seeing mainly sunny skies as well, with a high of 15 degrees, 16 for the high in Halifax. Also fog dissipating in both of those cities by the morning there. 17 for the high in Charlottetown with clear skies, up to 40K winds, and 10 degrees tomorrow in St. John's with clear skies, also 40 to 60K winds there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Passengers traveling on Via Rail's route between Montreal to Windsor may have to brace for slower trips after Canadian National Railway imposed restrictions on Via's new trains. CN says Via's new Siemens train running on the heavily traveled corridor must lower its speed at public crossings. The rule previously only applied between Montreal and Quebec City, and Via says it is causing average delays of about 30 minutes. CN owns most of the tracks used by Via in central Canada and says it made the decision when it learned the new trains were using routes they previously steered clear of. Company officials at Amazon say they're investing in small nuclear reactors just days after a similar announcement by Google. Analysts say both tech giants are looking for new sources of carbon-free electricity to meet surging demand from data centers and artificial intelligence.
It's clear that AI is going to require a lot of power and a lot of data centers. And our focus here is on obviously empowering these with clean, carbon-free energy.
We're thrilled that AWS is the latest to BYOP, as we say, bring your own power to the build out of these data centers. And obviously SMR, small modular reactors, are a huge piece of how we're going to solve this puzzle of getting to 100% clean electricity by 2035 while responding to all of the demand that will be created as a result of the data centers and the other and the new factories, et cetera, that are coming online.
And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 132 basis points of the day to 24,822. The Dow was also up 36 basis points to 43,275. The S&P 500 was up 23 points to 5,864, and the Nasdaq was also up 115 basis points to 18,489. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $1.32 to $69.35 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to $2.34 US. Gold was up $28.60 to $2,719.60 US an ounce, and silver was up $2.10 to $33.68 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.94 per bushel, barley is at $6.03, canola is at $13.97, and corn is at $7.21 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was up $1 to $187.63. Feeder cattle October contract was up $1.60 to $248.33, and the lean hogs December contract was up 50 cents to $78.25. And the Canadian dollar was slightly down over the past 24 hours and currently sits at $72.50 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a special Chiefs Assembly hosted by the Assembly of First Nations wrapped up in Calgary on Friday with a resolution on child welfare reform here in Canada. First Nations chiefs rejected a nearly $48 billion child welfare reform deal on Thursday following a lengthy debate. One of the resolutions includes for chiefs to be given another 90 days to review the agreement, with another vote taking place sometime in January. You know, there's a family in the United States that has 16 children. Could you imagine that? Coming up, we're going to chat with the dad, Connor Gallagher, about some of the challenges he and his family have seen raising that big family. He even wrote a book on the subject called A Well-Ordered Family. Watch that Q&A with the very busy dad, Connor Gallagher, coming up shortly. When you see news happening in your community, please drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. You know, today's families often feel anxious and frustrated by the overwhelming chaos of society. How can we as parents bring order to our family? Today's guest may have a few answers for us. Joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina, is Connor Gallagher. He and his wife, Ashley, are parents to 16 children. That's right, that's not a typo, 16 kids. Connor also runs several businesses, and he's the executive director of the Benedict Leadership Institute at Belmont Abbey College. He's also author of Well-Ordered Family. Connor, you are a very busy guy. Good to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think I'm only busy when I'm doing my own will, but if I'm doing what God wants me to do, he makes time for everything I need to get done. So that's how I like to talk about busyness, you know.
Now, you and your wife have 16 kids. I mean, I've got 2 kids. That was more than enough for my wife and myself. I mean, 16, that's more than a baseball team. Were they all natural birth? Do you have any foster kids? Some were adopted?
All biological and one set of twins. So my oldest is 22, and then my youngest is 3 weeks old. We had little Monica 3 weeks ago, and actually,
wow.
A little gray hair here, somewhere there, shows that I am now a grandfather. So my daughter, my 21-year-old, had a baby 3 months ago, and my son is having a baby in like a week or two. So, yeah, my wife and I, it wasn't so weird for me to be a granddad, but looking at my beautiful young wife it's weird that you're a grandma. That's the weird thing, even more so than having 16 kids for me. So.
When your child having a child and you've got a 3-week-old, so that 3-week-old will be an uncle or aunt,
That's right. That's right. Little Aunt Monica was born Aunt Monica. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, let me ask you something, Connor. In today's society, today's economy, how can you simply afford to raise 16 kids?
Well, you know, there's the old saying, cheaper by a dozen, by the dozen. But, the reality is that, you have to take each child individually and assess before you have another, what's God's plan here? So psychologically, emotionally, physically, financially, those are questions that you have to ask before you have more kids. And so we've always asked that one kid at a time. We never had a goal to have a certain amount of kids. But in terms of the money, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's been some like really horrific reports that I have serious problems with about how much it costs to raise kids in today's world. And I think that's coming from a very kind of globalist, far-leaning left agenda saying you can't afford kids because it costs so much to raise them. And I just know that that's just false on so many levels. Yeah, kids are expensive. I'm not saying they're not. But the typical family can make some sacrifices, can live a life more conducive to a larger family, and they make it work. I just know too many people living off a household income of even $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 and having multiple kids. We've been very blessed financially. I've been successful at business, so I'm not trying to say that we've had to be that simple. I used to have to be that simple before my businesses took off, but never, I shouldn't say never, very rarely is money itself in our very abundant world and lifestyle the legitimate excuse to not have more children. I think there's a lot of other reasons that somebody might have to slow down, but I haven't met too many people who are just too dirt poor to have another child made in the image and likeness of God.
Hey, but wait till all those kids want to go to college or university. Then you'll see how expensive it can be.
It can be. I got a few that have been through already. I get an idea of it, yeah.
Are you guys planning on having more children, or 16 the cutoff point?
No, there's no cutoff point. We'll just see what's in store for my wife and God's plan, and so we take it again one at a time. So right now we try to be the best we can for 16, just like we tried to be the best for 1. who knows? If we have another one, I'll come back on the show in a couple of years and tell you about it.
Now, what are some of the other challenges, Connor, when raising that many children? Do you find that maybe some of the older kids are helping to raise some of the younger kids?
Oh, yeah. So all my analogies in this new business I have, Wilder Family, is about how to apply business principles to family life. So I like to call my teenagers mid-level management. So first of all, you don't raise 16 kids. Again, 4 of my kids have grown and gone. I mean, they're in college or they're out of college, having their own families. So you don't actually have to fit 16 kids into a car. It's not like that. But the challenges are, whether it's 16 or 2 or 1 even, I think the challenges are in today's world managing the stress and anxiety. There is way too many expectations on a modern parent because they think, well, the kids have to play every sport. They have to be musicians. They have to be on the honor roll. Mom and dad have to work out and be in great shape, and all of these things. And everybody has to have the right cars, the right clothes, the right vacation. That's overwhelming. But that's keeping up with the Joneses. That's a cultural phenomenon. And one of my missions, Hal, is to help families show, no, you are the architect of your family. Mom and dad, you have to be visionaries of your family, just like you have visionaries or a CEO at business. You have to decide, what are the ultimate goals? What's the culture our family's going to grow up in? What is the environment that we're going to construct, like the architect, to build our community the way we want it? And that means making decisions to cut things away and to embrace other things. So the challenge for me is, as every other viewer you have here, constructing your environment so the stress and anxiety of the modern world does not control you, but you control your environment because your kids deserve it.
So how do you really maintain order in your household, Connor, and still find time for you and Ashley?
That's a great question. So yeah, Ashley and I, number one, that's first. Right? God's first, spouse is second, kids are third. And I think you have to keep that priority in line. And when I put my wife first, then my kids benefit from it tremendously. But, we have to have just like in business, Hal, to really stay on the same page, you have to first know what your vision is. What is your mission statement at work? What's your vision statement at work? So I help people craft their vision statement or their mission statement for their family. We choose core values. We choose a number of different business tools like strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And so we're able to look and say, we agree, Ashley and I, on the big picture goals. Like, we know where we're trying to go, just like my executive team here knows where it's trying to go in the business. So when conflict and stress arises, we're able to double down and say, we know where we're going, so we're going to get through this little shortcoming or this little difficulty together as a united team. And so all of my kids and my wife were one big team doing it, and I create tools to help people do that so the little things don't throw you off track too much.
Now, in your book, Connor, you write about 4 types of family gatherings. Can you explain what these involve and why you see them as so important?
Absolutely. So, the greatest business mind of our time is a guy named Jim Collins, and he wrote probably the best-selling book of all time called Good to Great. And he said something beautiful. He said, successful companies is 1% vision, 99% alignment around the vision. So family meetings are all about staying on the same page. So people say, how do you stay on the same page? I say, well, first, literally have a page, have a piece of paper. And so we have a meeting cadence. So number one, my family has a weekly meeting. I call it a huddle, just like a football team gets together and has a quick huddle. We have a weekly huddle on Sunday nights, just logistics. It's the only time how you'll hear me tell all my kids, get your cell phones out. I want to see everybody with their cell phones because we're looking at calendars. We're looking at what do you have this week, what practices, what social events. So that stays on the same page, a little prayers mixed in there. And I have an agenda that's 10 minutes long that help you knock this out real quick. So that's a weekly agenda to just make sure that you're all on the same page. In that meeting, how we also talk about what are the upcoming stressors, mom, dad, what are these things this week that might be stressing you out? What are you afraid of? And also, what are the opportunities, these things that we can reach out and grab? So that's an example of how it's logistical, but it's also a spiritual or psychological meeting. And you knock it out real quick so it's not over the top and no one resents it, or it's not time for discipline. It's just a logistical meeting. But I also have a quarterly meeting, an annual meeting, and I also have a meeting that's just for mom and dad, where it's a real heart-to-heart, it's a really emotional meeting. And I have agendas for these to just kind of make it easy for you to follow. And it feels a little corny sometimes having an agenda for your family meeting, but actually it desensitizes you from the weirdness and it helps you embrace it and you just follow the agenda and it makes it so much smoother. We need good meetings, whether we're in athletics, we call that practice. We need good meetings at business. We need good meetings in the family because we're a group of people trying to accomplish a goal together.
It's funny, circling back to the football reference and the huddling there, I'm just picturing that you've got enough kids to form a football team, so offense and defense, and that's what's great about it. Connor, in today's crazy society, how can parents really safeguard their children while also nurturing their spiritual growth and enabling to do what's right even while facing peer pressure?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I would say how that the biggest, most obvious threat, I would say, we have urgent threats like, oh, the kid's running out into the road. That's an urgent threat. But you also have important threats like, long-term chastity or purity or whatever like that. But there's an urgent threat and an important threat that are attacking the family right now, especially kids. And it's these darn cell phones. It's the media. It's the digital life, video games, social media, everything like that. So what I tell parents is I created a tool called the Digital Policy Builder. And what I have found, Hal, is that parents, of course, want to protect their children from the internet, from the negative influences out there. And I'm not saying the internet's bad. It's not. We're on it right now. Thank God for this, or else I wouldn't be here. But what I'm saying is you have to be absolutely perfectly clear with your kid what the expectations and rules are. Most conflict with especially teenagers does not come from the teenager disagreeing with mom or dad about the rules are. It actually comes from a misunderstanding of what the rule is precisely. And I could give many examples of that some other time, but what kids need is very precise rules. And I think it helps if mom and dad write down those rules on this digital policy that I have, because then it says, who can you communicate with? When can you communicate with them? On what devices, what platforms, et cetera, et cetera. That's what kids need today. And mom and dad need to take it real serious, because guess what? If you don't have a clear policy, then guess what? You actually have a policy, and it is entrust your kids to the internet. And I think you love your kids more than to just entrust them to that. So get your pen and get your paper and write this down, and your kids will appreciate the clarity.
As a parent myself, I found that it was very important to implement structure for my wife and I and for our family, for our kids, and just to really show where the boundaries were, right? To play within those boundaries. Now, Connor, you write about something you call Key Family Process, KFP for parents. What is it exactly, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so in a business, you have key processes, and I believe that it's important for a business to write down what are the key processes to make my business work. Maybe it's what's my marketing process to capture a new email? How do I take care of the accounting process? How do I do customer service? How do I ship a product out to you at your house? There's key processes, business processes. Well, so I took that same idea and applied it to family. So what are the processes in a family life? Well, it might be like getting the dishes done. It might be getting the laundry done. It might be the family budget, making sure that you're paying down debt at a certain rate. It might be the homework, like getting a certain GPA with your kids, make sure they get good grades. It might be yard work. So there are certain key family processes which deserve to be documented so that the responsible party knows exactly what they're expected to do, when they're expected to do it, how they're expected to do it. Something as simple as a chore chart. Like in my house, man, getting the dishes and the laundry done, it's hard. It's hard. There's just so much. It's like a nuclear bomb goes off in my house every day and you have to clean. And so that's a major part of our house. So documenting precisely what the expectations are. And I think it's good to have a master list of all the different processes that mom and dad kind of want to oversee. Otherwise, conflict erupts because the expectations aren't precisely clear.
I'm glad you brought that up, Connor. Let's chat a bit about conflict here. It's inevitable in any family. How can parents resolve conflict while acknowledging and understanding both their own feelings and the feelings of others?
I think the way to handle most conflict, Hal, is recognizing the person that God put into your family versus the person you wish was in your family. And so in business, we've really learned in business, corporate America over the last 30 years has really learned the value of assessment tests. We take a lot of assessment tests to see what is this person's strengths and weaknesses and to build on their strengths rather than trying to fix all their weaknesses. That's what they used to do way back when. Now we've learned that, hey, find out what this girl or guy's good at and build on that. And can you put them in a position to where they thrive? And then you're not fighting an uphill battle all the time. And there's all kinds of assessments and they're fun. People love taking them. So I've shown in my book a number of assessment tests that you can use for your family. And when you do those, the person that God made naturally is coming out at you. It's one of the things I've learned. Even this 3-week-old baby, Hal, I'm already seeing a personality take shape. I didn't create that personality through the environment. This is written into her DNA. And so it's just there, put there by God. So when you do these assessment tests and really continually focus on what the natural temperament and personality of this kid is, it cuts down on the fighting and the bickering and the resentment, because you see, they're wired this way. Now, what do I do about that? How do I handle it? How do I communicate to them? That's where, you have to start fleshing that out. But one size does not fit all. And when you appreciate the differences of each personality in your family, a lot of the stress goes away.
And you believe that it's key for families to learn how to really solve problems together. Why is that so important? How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, just like you do it in a business. The CEO does not go off into his office with his pad of paper and figure out everything. No, he brings in the team to kind of work through problems. So we have a number of decision-making tools and problem-solving tools that we've put into this book for families to use. So if it's something as simple like my wife and I were trying to figure out what kind of goat to buy recently. We bought pregnant goats. We had a bunch of goats. We needed to buy some pregnant goats so the kids could watch the miracle of birth and sell the little baby goats. So it's a funny little thing, but we were trying to decide between 3 or 4 options. So I pulled out one of my tools and we used the tool, and the kids sat there and helped us figure out which pregnant goat did we want to buy. And it sounds like a goofy situation, but if you have to buy a car, it can be very stressful. If you have to do an addition to your house or renovate something, very stressful. I have tools there where the whole family can contribute to analyzing the situation. What's the financial impact, the emotional impact? How do you quantify the psychological components of this? How do you quantify the time needed to work on these things? You start getting the kids, and you'd be surprised how young they can contribute. Even a 6, 7, 8-year-old can really contribute to these things because they have a sense of mom and dad's stress level that sometimes we don't even have. So when you put these things on paper and use my decision-making tools and problem-solving tools, it really kind of helps the team work together to solve the problem, as opposed to mom and dad just doing it on their own.
Connor Gallagher is the father of 16 children, that's right, 16 kids, and author of Well-Ordered Family, which is available at wellorderedfamily.com. Connor, thanks so much for joining us today from Charlotte, North Carolina.
It was a pleasure. I'm humbled to be here. Thanks so much.
At some point in our life, we will experience the loss of a loved one and we'll grieve that loss, but we might not know exactly how to handle the ups and downs that come with this. So what are some healthy ways to go through the grieving process? Well, joining me to share some advice on this is Siobhan Parr, who is a pastor of church life at Lethbridge Evangelical Free Church, and Joanne Penner-Heron. Together they lead the Grief Share Loss and Support Group. Ladies, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, so first off, can you maybe give us a snapshot of what your Grief Share Support Group is about and what people would experience if they dropped into one of your gatherings?
Sure. So Grief Share is a group faith-based program, and it's offered to anyone who is grieving the loss of a loved one through death. It is a 13-week program with 13 sessions. And when you come to this group, you come to look for support. We offer care, encouragement, lots of listening. Videos are offered. First of all, there are 3 parts to each week. There's a video produced by Church Initiative, which has excellent counselors, pastors, and people speaking of their experiences during grief. And then there's a discussion time about the video. So we all share together our own emotional pain and things we are working through. And then following that, each participant goes home with a workbook and they reflect on questions each week and come back and we carry on to another area of grief. So it's a sharing of our loss, and it's faith-based, which gives us a very strong faith support to build our healing upon.
Right, 13 weeks. Okay, that's a long
Yes.
process there. All right.
It is fairly.
Okay. How often do you have these sessions, I guess?
Well, we have them as needed, I would like to suggest. So there are other churches in town who run the Grief Share program as well, and we try not to overlap and offer them at the same time. So we are in conversation with them, and if you're offering it one semester, then we won't. So it's a little unpredictable to just say actual times and schedules. But if you go on the website, the griefshare.org website, you can see what's offered in Lethbridge each semester, and people can go wherever they like.
Are these 1-hour sessions? You may have mentioned already.
They're 2-hour sessions, at least because there's time for the video and the discussion and joining together as well. There are some options to do groups online. Our current version of that is to do it completely in person, but it's something that we might be looking at in the future as well, just as times change. But the community and fellowship is very important part of it as well. So we're leaning into the in person.
That really makes sense, and building those connections 100%. So now I've heard that grief has several stages that we tend to go through. So can you maybe share those with us?
There's 5 common stages of grief. It's from the Kubler-Ross. Her book came out in the 60s on death and dying.
Psychology, yes.
And it's really set the stage for the different phases. Originally, it was thought that it was maybe a linear progression, is that you go through each one individually, but we understand it more of it's like in waves. Grief comes in waves. So the standard 5 that we're looking at is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But there could be times, you've come to the point of acceptance, but then anger creeps up as well. So it's a process where different things can pop up at different times as well. But those are the traditional ones that we'll be dealing with and understanding and working through as well.
And of course, they do say that people grieve in different ways, and some people are more emotional, some like to be kind of left alone, others maybe need to be around people, right? So I mean, there's no a scenario where everyone goes through this the same way, right?
No, it's very unpredictable and very unique and individual. And we grieve depending on our age, our stage, the extent of our relationships. We deal according to personality, as you just suggested. We can be external grievers and wear our grief very overtly. We can be internal grievers and manage our grief differently. So even in one household, you could have 2 or 3 or 4 people all grieving somewhat differently. And to understand that is really helpful. It's helpful to support each other, and it's helpful to walk through the whole process to health at the end of it all.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've heard also that regret is a common emotion in the grief process. Why would that be?
With regrets, it's not just sadness and grief. Grief brings out many emotions, and some of those might come from the things that you didn't say to the person while they were alive, the things that you wish you would have done if you just had one more moment with them. What would change? Or maybe the actions that led to their death. There could be some regrets around that. If I'd picked up that phone call, if I'd just done this one thing. That's what makes it quite complex and hard to deal with by yourself as well. And this process, it helps to be able to talk about things, to normalize just the amount of intense emotions that people could be feeling.
Oh, 100%.
And helps us learn how to helps us learn how to manage feelings of guilt that can arise from all of these if onlys. If only I had, and then guilt ensues sometimes after that.
Guilt, regret, and I would imagine loneliness is often an issue that's part of the grieving process as well, right? So what are maybe some unhealthy methods that people use to deal with their grief? And is there a way that we can help someone who's maybe spiraling downward?
So the part of grief is the loneliness, as you mentioned. You're going to experience a loneliness because it's the loss of someone that you loved in your life, in this grief that we're dealing with. And so a lot of times for spouses as well, there's a definite loss of someone who was there with them, perhaps all the time throughout their lifetime. When it changes to so the loneliness is going to be normal, but then when it becomes unhealthy, we see extreme isolation, cutting yourself off from others and those other connections as well. Sometimes you need to be alone. Sometimes you need to have that time to yourself to be able to cry. But when it becomes withdrawing from the world, that starts to become unhealthy. Other methods then that come in is someone may try and numb the pain that they're feeling through the use of substances to escape some of the things that they're feeling, which you can understand, but it can spiral wrong very quickly. So in those circumstances, we ask that people reach out for help, and if they're not able to reach out themselves, that the friends and family are able to come alongside them and to just spend time with them, to encourage them to get the help, to increase the connections that they have with others, so that the unhealthy methods aren't the primary methods that people turn to.
Right. It's got to be such a balancing act, because at the same time, you should never tell someone who's grieving that they should be over it by now, right?
That's very right. Very right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with that said, when friends and relatives are maybe grieving, oftentimes we don't know what to say or what to do.
That's right.
So what are some do's and don'ts of how to, kind of talk to somebody who is going through this?
Well, probably the most important thing we can do is to just think before we speak, and listen a lot. A touch, a hug, if that's appropriate and accepted, is really welcome, to let them know we are here, that we are empathetic, but to listen before we speak. And sometimes the only a very neutral but caring thing to say is, I'm just so sorry for your loss, and I have no words. I loved your partner. I loved your person, or I didn't know them very well, but I've heard such good things. I am so sorry. And probably contrasted to that would be a very unhelpful response might be, oh, I know just how you're feeling. I went through this. And while that may have threads of truth, we do not know how somebody else is feeling. So to impose and suggest that we do is not helpful, because nobody really understands our particular pain. And so it's something that it takes some thought. I think we just need to not believe that we have the answers for somebody who's grieving, but we need to learn with them, walk alongside. Another thing that's very helpful is to not pretend we know what they need, and just bring over, the 15th lasagna, which is really tasty, but that's a lot of food possibly. And just say, I'll call you next week and check in and see what you need then. And there are varieties of ways. How would you like me to come and vacuum your home on Friday? Would that be helpful? And instead of presuming that we know what people need. So it's a very empathetic response and a listening response more than anything. Let them talk about their loved one. They need to. They need to talk a lot about their loved one, and we need to listen.
That's really,
so those are some helpful things.
Really good advice there. Thank you for that. Now, what advice might you have for people who don't seem to be able to move on with the new normal in their life, and they seem kind of stuck in constant grief? And there's no real timeline, right? Everybody's different.
That's right.
Yeah. It's different for each person. It really is. It's different for each person. And what a new normal may look like, to go back to discover what that might be. What the person is looking for, they might not know that we're trying to help them see is that eventually they might be able to come to a place where the feelings that they're experiencing from the loss are less overwhelming at that time. And that might be the new normal for them.
It may be, but in terms of getting unstuck, I think to help people move forward with a purpose, and Grief Share is very good for that. We can address issues that might be holding us back. And, there's a lovely, lovely saying that I really have used a lot in my own life, and that is that memories are not meant to hold us hostage. So we are in the same circle of self-muddling, but they're meant to transform us. And so you move forward with purpose in this whole process of transformation. So, and then that becomes a new normal that you can greet and embrace and live with. But we need support for that. And Grief Share certainly helps support people in that position.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is it helpful for people to maybe write down their thoughts and emotions in a journal?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would suggest that journaling is integral to this program. And don't let anyone be kind of scared off by that at all if you haven't been writing. But we each receive a participant workbook. And in that workbook, there is space to write down your own thoughts and come back to the class with what you've written. You don't need to share it with anybody at all, but it helps us to sort through and clarify our emotions. And if we can clarify with a writing process, that can be the most healing thing. And we never really recognize our pain and the circle of chaos till we see it on paper. And we can move through then. It gives us ideas for how to move through that. So journaling is really a key thing, wouldn't you say?
I love it. It gives a way to get all of the emotions out. You don't have to stop your thoughts or regulate. You just put it all onto the page, everything that you're thinking, that you're feeling, that you're going through, and it helps to be able to express that in your own way that you can hold privately as well. You don't need to share that, but it's important that it does come out.
Yeah, exactly. I would imagine it's very therapeutic.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Very.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we're about out of time here, but I really appreciate you ladies for joining me today and talking about this really hard subject.
Yeah. It is, but it's also, we can hold joy and sorrow in two hands, and we can experience alternately as we move through this journey, less sorrow and more joy, and some days more sorrow and less joy. But if we understand the process of how to allow ourselves to embrace a new way of living and a new normal, then we come through whole on the other side.
Absolutely. Well, Pastor Siobhan and Joanne, thanks so much for joining me
You're
today.
very welcome. You're very welcome.
Pastor Siobhan Parr and Joanne Panner-Heron lead the Grief Share Loss and Support Group at Lethbridge Evangelical Free Church. So great to have them on today. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.